Park. We're very fortunate that Clay Township has provided significant funding for upgrades to many of our parks, including River Heritage and also Lawrence W. Inlow, which we'll be discussing after this topic. Just to give a little bit of background with River Heritage Park, we've had this conversation over the last couple park board meetings, but this park is located off of River Road along the river, and most of the park, it's 40 acres that is leased from Citizens Energy Group, which has a water processing plant immediately to the north of our park, north of the green line, upper part of the green line on the illustration. And we recently were informed by Citizens Energy Group that they're going to be expanding operations at this plant, which will mean they'll be adding a new underground reservoir, roughly 2 acres in the front portion of the park, which is highlighted on the map for you. Additionally, because of that project, there's going to be significant infrastructure a little bit to the east of where the reservoir comes in. However, they're about a year to year and a half away from actually developing the plans, hiring the design team to begin developing the plans for this particular project, which creates some challenges for us because the township issued bonds that need to be expended this year, or we face arbitrage and some potential for penalties. So we want to maximize the dollars that we have available from this bond. What that means is originally we were looking to do a significant amount of renovations in the original portion of the park, which includes what has been dubbed everyone's playground. It's one of the earliest inclusive playgrounds, adaptive playgrounds in the state of Indiana. It includes the parking lot, the restroom facilities, and we're looking to upgrade all of those amenities. However, because they're in the area that may be impacted by Citizens Energy Group's expansion project, it doesn't seem like a wise use of public dollars to invest in infrastructure that may ultimately be impacted by their expansion project. So we're going to focus all of our work basically to the east of those areas within the wooded area of the park. So as we were looking at what can we do with this park, we use several guiding principles. As you know, usually we like working very extensively with the public to get public input, but as we were going through the process to develop plans for this particular park, we kept getting into stumbling blocks with the expansion plans for citizens. Originally, we were looking at the potential to be able to do some of the upgrades we were originally thinking about, but ultimately they came to the conclusion that it wasn't wise, and any investments that we make into the park, they would have to ultimately, under the current lease agreement, make reimbursement for anything that they damage. So we came to the conclusion that we're going to work to the east. But to help guide us as far as how we look at what we do, first we considered the history of this park. This park, like I said, had one of the first accessible playgrounds in the state of Indiana. And it really sparked the dedication of the park board as well as the park system in ensuring that we're serving people with disabilities. So we wanted to make sure that we respected that history within this park. Additionally, this park does have a master plan. The master plan was approved by the park board in 1997. At the time, it was actually called the IWC Park Site Master Plan for Indianapolis Water Company, which was the precursor to Citizens Energy Group. But the master plan incorporated many of the things that we ultimately did develop: the playground, the restroom, the shelters in the front portion of the park, but it also included an extensive trail network within the park system. The yellow portion that's on the screen actually was developed and largely to the master plan, and that's where the playground and the shelters are, as well as the hills with sort of the mounds if you've been to the park. That area, that plan was completed. However, there was a vision for nature trails as well as boardwalks that ultimately went to the river, and it also included the idea of 2 overlooks of the river so that people can get glimpses of the river both up and downstream. Ultimately, it made sense to implement this master plan, but to take into consideration that this park has transformed over the years. And originally, these trails weren't envisioned to be fully accessible, but based on the funding that we have for this particular project, we have the means to make this a fully accessible trail system. So this is the vision working with the design team that we've come up with for River Heritage Park that we're asking the Park Board to consider tonight. Focusing first on the western end of the park where the construction ultimately could be impacted by the expansion of the water plant. We're basically leaving this area alone. Parking lot, the restrooms, the shelters all will remain as is, with the idea that after the expansion occurs, which is anticipated to be within 3 or so years, we'll come back in and do the upgrades that this portion of the park desperately needs. But again, it just doesn't make sense to invest significant dollars within this place. The existing playground, that playground, since it opened 20 years ago, is at the end of its lifespan. Typically, a playground will last in the Midwest usually 17 to 20 years, 15 to 20 years actually is the guidelines. So obviously we're at the end of that anticipated lifespan, and doing inspections of that, it is inspected regularly by our in-house maintenance staff. We do have certified playground safety inspectors on staff, and it has been identified that that system is starting to fail. So we ultimately do need to remove the main structure, but it doesn't make sense to reinvest and put a new structure in knowing that it could be impacted. But we can put some play features in there, again accessible, so that they can accommodate wheelchairs that can ultimately be reused, relocated once the new playground is developed in 3 to 5 years. So the investments we make can be recouped. But that does mean that this playground will not be near as exciting as it is today, but exciting things to come. Now focusing on the east end of the park, it really is the trail network. And what we're looking at is a trail network that is truly accessible for wheelchairs as well as for parents with smaller children that they bring the strollers out. So it'll be an accessible, a fully accessible trail network in here. And we're looking at close to 2.5 acres of trails within the woods here. To give a sort of representation of what those trails might look like, if you go to Central Park in the East Woods, we have an aggregate sidewalk, concrete sidewalk from the Monon Community Center to the East Woods picnic grove. So basically we're looking at trails very similar to that. We want it to be wheel friendly, but we don't want it to look like the Monon Greenway. We want it to feel like a nature trail. So we want something that is softer earth tones and feels nature component, but is very wheelchair friendly. So we're still identifying if this is the right type of application, and we're also looking at some other ones, but regardless, it'll be wheel friendly. Additionally, we're looking at within the area, there's a number of areas. Most of the park is actually within the floodplain, so we can expect it to periodically flood. So everything will be designed to accommodate that. But there are some areas that are wetlands, and in those areas, it's going to require boardwalks. So the boardwalks we're looking at are very similar to what we have within the park system in West Park and Central Park, as well as what we're constructing in Meadowlark Park. So something similar to this photo here. Again, very wheel friendly. As we move on, the original master plan envisioned 2 overlooks. We still envision 2 overlooks, but we're spreading them out a little bit further to make a little bit more dynamic as far as what you can see. When we were scouting the trails with the design team, Curtis and Michael Allen, our Parks and Natural Resources Director, and myself, as well as our design team, looking at where these trails could go, we actually had 4 bald eagles flying over us at the same time by the river. So those are the types of experiences the public can experience. Can't guarantee they're going to be out there every single time. I was out there today and no bald eagles today, but we actually had 4. First we thought they were owls, but as we were looking a little bit closer, first we saw 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. It was quite the experience. We also saw during that same visit white-tailed deer. So you will see wildlife out here. But we're looking at an actual platform that gives you glimpses down the river. And this is actually one of the views that you'll be able to see from the envisioned places. It's sort of hard to see in this photo, but in the river there's actually an island that you'll be able to see the water splitting across from one of the 2 viewing stands. So quite dynamic views. Makes you feel like you're not in the middle of an urban area, and something I'm very excited about. It's also going to include some play experiences. So while we'll be removing some of the play structures within the original portion of the park, we will be adding some play structures along the trail. Think a little bit like what we did in West Park behind the Jill Perlman Pavilion. Not exactly this play equipment, but something of a similar concept where it's a play experience within the woods. Might be an opportunity for a second zip line, which is one of our most popular features in the new playground in West Park. Additionally, we're looking at a picnic grove, sort of an open picnic area where some of the trails come together. A great place to meet. Also, an inspiration from Central Park. In between the Monon Community Center, the East Building, and the picnic grove in the East Woods, we have an area where there's just some picnic tables. In this particular park in River Heritage, we would look to make sure that, again, they're wheel friendly, so it wouldn't be necessarily just in the turf, but the same type of concept where there's a little bit of opening where there's no trees, where we can put some picnic tables, people can meet up. Great place if someone wants to read or you know, have a lunch, or maybe even do artwork or other things like that. Another area that I'm really excited about, and this is my Huckleberry Finn experience, Tom Sawyer experience within the park. As you get along one of the trails, and some of these trails have somewhat been created by fishers going out there and experiencing the creek, and our maintenance team has actually knocked down some of the vegetation so people can get out there, but we'll be formalizing them. But there's a place where you can really get down to the river. Over here, the river is on a bluff, so the river's about 4 to 6 feet below where the earth is throughout most of the park. But there's one area where it's real easy to get down. Again, it is getting down to it. I can't make this area accessible, but we can put in some stones where you can get a little bit closer to the water, similar to what you see at the bottom left. And the picture above in the center is actually the area. And when water is at low levels, it actually, this channel will dry up, and there's ability to actually walk across to an island. And it's sort of that experience of feeling uncharted territory and being out on a wild river. During higher water, you certainly won't be able to get to it, but during low water, it just adds to the park. And there's that strip of land that you can see that you'll actually be able to get out to during the summer months. During the spring and winter and higher water seasons, you certainly won't be able to, but a neat experience as well. And I thought it would be interesting just to share with you, while we think of it as a natural area and a wooded area, most of the woods are actually quite new. This photo was taken in 1936. The red outline represents both the park and the water plant, the entire property that is owned by Citizens Energy Group. And you can see back in 36, and actually as recently as 1985, the land looks substantially similar to this. It was fields, and not a lot of trees except next to the river. This was from a satellite photo in 2019, so you can see that it's filled in quite substantially, but they're young trees. So it's not like walking in the East Woods. They're much younger trees, but it's still a pretty incredible tree experience, and there's some prairie areas in there as well. And of course, the future that we have moving forward for the park. So tonight we're asking the Park Board to approve this schematic plan. This will serve as the guide as we work with the township to develop construction documents. We'll be looking to bid this project out end of this month, actually more likely in February, with construction starting this spring. Any significant variances from this plan would have to be approved by me under the agreement we have with the Clay Township for this project, as well as I would be required to notify the board, which I would of course do so. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you have for the vision for River Heritage Park.
Questions for Michael?
Question.
Linus?
The leasing of this property, how often do we renew our lease?
It's a automatically renewing lease. It's actually a 10-year lease that renews automatically. We are looking to actually update that lease so that it has additional protections and takes into consideration the expansion work that they're doing. But it's a lease that's been in place well, obviously since before 20 years ago when we developed the park, but has just automatically renewed. I've had extensive conversations with Citizens Energy Group. They're not actually inquired about the potential of them donating or us purchasing the property. They aren't interested in releasing their ownership rights in this property, but they do very much like having a park here. It's a good complementary use to their operations. They just said that they're not in the practice of selling the assets that they have. But they're very excited about having us here. We would need to work with them, any variations. So this does expand the footprint from the master plan a little bit. So we'll have a conversation with them, should the park board approve it tonight, to ensure that they're completely on board with this. But, you know, we don't envision any issues, and they certainly don't have any expansion plans within the wooded area. It's all in the floodplain, so they're very limited as to what they could do anyway. But that's sort of the lease as it is today.
Good info, thank you.
Thank you.